So do you believe in the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good notion of God?
What do you mean by believe?
Okay, now this guy just asked a perfectly legitimate question. Do you believe in an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-perfect God? That this is sort of the standard historic definition of God. It's not a viable definition because it's just in negatives. He's unlimited in all of these regards, so he has no limits. This goes back to the issue of infinite. So it's not really a viable definition, but it's what is reasonably taken by someone to be the meaning of God when somebody says God, particularly when somebody, speaking about the Bible, whether he's a Christian or not, says the word God. You can assume that this is what he's talking about and that he believes in this thing. Peterson derails this question by saying to the guy, well, what do you mean by believe? As if, regular people and, longtime academic intellectuals like Peterson don't know what this term means. And what's really interesting is the young man gives a perfectly legitimate answer to what belief means, and then Peterson accuses him of committing the fallacy of circular definition. So listen to this.
Do you think it to be true?
That's the circular definition. What do you mean
How
when
is
you
that
say you
circular?
believe?
How is that circular?
Because you added no content to the answer by substituting the word true.
Now, that is just a ridiculous claim. The definition, a perfectly viable definition of the concept of belief, is to think something to be true or to accept something as true. Now, you can accept something as true on the basis of evidence, so that's rational acceptance of an idea, or you can accept something as true in the absence of evidence or even in defiance of evidence, and that's why we have the concept of faith. So you can believe through reason or you can believe through faith, and belief is a term that is useful. I mean, sometimes we don't have sufficient evidence to fully believe something, but we have substantial evidence to think that it's true. And this happens a lot in life. If I arrive at home and I see my wife's car in the driveway, I have really good reason to believe that she's home, but it's not knowledge that she's home. She might have gone for a walk or have gone out with a friend or something in another car. So belief is a perfectly legitimate concept, but it needs to be defined, and it needs to be differentiated, the kinds of belief to, evidence-based or not evidence-based. So it's an interesting discussion that you could have about this. But when the young man asks Peterson, do you believe in this kind of God? And Peterson skirts the question and just says, what do you mean by believe? And by the way, he completely derailed this, as we'll see. They're not going back to whether Peterson believes in that kind of God, because Peterson successfully derailed this question.
All right. So if
What's
you
a
believe
belief?
something, you stake your life on it.
What do you mean by that?
You live for it and you die for it. That's what I mean by that.
So this is ridiculous too. To accept something as true does not mean that you live for it or die for it. I can accept as true that my wife is home if I see her car in the driveway. And I can believe it to be true. I could be right or wrong about that, but I'm not going to live or die for her being home in that moment. There's a sense in which the idea of belief does tie to action, which is where Peterson is going to go here to some extent. But it ties in this way. If you truly believe something, that means your actions will reflect that fact. So if I were to say, I believe I can jump off, a 50-story building and fly, with no contraption to help me. You could say, well, I don't think you really believe that, because if you did, you would go do it and show me that you believe it. And of course, I wouldn't do it because I don't believe it. So just saying that you believe something does not mean that you believe it. Your actions speak louder than your words, and as the cliche goes, and that's true, but it's kind of trivially true. And Peterson is I think he was trying to make that kind of point, but he's so angry at this point, and he's so feels so uncomfortable in his skin that instead he lashes out and he makes a complete buffoon of himself here.
It isn't something that you say. It isn't something that's associated with logical consistency. It's not declarative. It's not propositional. It's not a figment of your imagination. It's the presupposition of your attention and your action. And you're either fragmented, in which case you worship multiple gods, or there's some unity at the bottom of it that makes you an unstoppable force.
Listen to the alternative he's putting on the table there. You're either fragmented and you worship multiple gods, or there's effectively one god at the base, and that makes you a big force. Well, what about the idea that there are no gods, Jordan? What about the possibility that we just choose values based on what we think is going to support our life and long-term happiness, and that we organize our values and make decisions on the basis of that kind of rational thinking? This is just completely out of the picture in this discussion, or at least from Peterson's perspective. And, in a sense, Peterson sounds like he's either pure evil or crazy or some mixture of the two. But you got to give, I guess, everyone to some extent a break if they were raised in a religious environment or with religious in a religious family where this stuff is shoved down their throats. Religion destroys the mind because it makes you believe that your reason is not efficacious, not sufficient to understand the world, to understand who you are, what human nature is, what good and bad, right and wrong are. It's just not a good tool for that. And those are the really important questions. It can answer trivial questions like scientific, questions about chemistry and engineering, but it can't answer the really big questions. And if you're raised that way and you accept it, which you don't have to, but if you do, you simply become progressively stupid as an adult, and I think this is what has happened to Peterson. I think his mind is simply disintegrating under the weight of nonsense.
So you're saying that you don't believe something if you wouldn't die for it? Is that
Not
what you're
really, no.
saying? Okay. So then,
How would you define belief? Something you say?
Can I explain? Like, I could believe it is the case that this pen exists, but if someone threatened my life, right, I would lie in order to be able to save my life, right? Like, I think you would do that too. You wouldn't lie to save your
Don't
life?
be so sure.
You wouldn't lie to save your life?
How much do you know about me? I didn't lie to save my career.
Here he is just lashing out. This young man is just simply trying to get his head around what Peterson thinks about things, and whether he holds on to not, thou shalt not tell a lie as some kind of categorical imperative, or whether he would tell a lie to save his life or someone else's life, and we're going to go to others here in a minute. But Peterson is just viciously angry at seemingly at the world at this point, but definitely at the people in this crowd and this young man. And it's unjustified. The young man is just trying to get clear on what Peterson thinks, and Peterson is just derailing questions, refusing to say what he thinks. Now, this business of never telling a lie, Peterson is a bit of a Kantian, as a lot of religious people are. They hold moral absolutes, or they hold commandments as moral absolutes. So it's the idea, thou shalt never tell a lie, rather than what a rational morality says about lying and honesty, which is you must never fake reality. You must never pretend that facts are other than they are. Why? Not because some commandment tells you that, but because you want to keep your mind connected to reality, because reality is where you live. And if your mind's not connected to that realm, then it's not going to be efficacious in that realm. So you should never pretend that facts are other than they are. But if someone is going to kill you, if you don't call a pen something other than a pen, you can absolutely lie to that person to get out of that emergency situation. And doing so is not dishonest. In fact, it's an act of honesty. It's an act of you refusing to pretend that facts are other than they are. In other words, refusing to pretend that this person making you do this has any right to do it, or has any right to any truth at all. Virtue owes nothing to vice. We don't owe people who do horrible things truth about anything. What we owe them is disrespect and disengagement, and if they violate rights, we owe them force, and if they try to kill us, we owe them death. So, you know, but Peterson doesn't think this way, and again, it's a bit obscene for someone his age and in his profession to be as lost as he is. But again, it shows how utterly destroyed a mind can be when it accepts religious ideas, particularly fundamental ideas like faith is a means of knowledge, or there's a God and you can't know him, but you have to say you know him anyway, et cetera, et cetera.
Would you lie to like save your children, your mom, your dad?
I don't think lying would save them.
Can there ever be a circumstance logically that lying could save someone?
Yeah, and if you're steeped in sin, you're likely to live in circumstances like that.
I'll give you an example. If you're like in like Nazi Germany, and it is the case that there's like Jewish people in your attic and you're trying to protect them, would you lie to like the Nazis? If
I
they're
would have
asking?
done everything I bloody well could, so I wouldn't be in that situation
you
to
lie?
begin with. It's a hypothetical, and it's
You
not
can't answer
answerable.
hypotheticals?
No, I can't answer a hypothetical like
What?
that because
Did
it's
you eat
far.
today?
I understand why people, and I've been there myself, don't want to answer absurd hypotheticals or hypotheticals that involve, you know, metaphysical impossibilities or the like. But this is not some absurd hypothetical. This is a hypothetical that actually happened to a lot of people, and not just in Nazi Germany. It happens if a robber comes to your door and says, you know, do you have a safe in your house? And you do have a safe in your house, but you say no. Well, you've lied. Did you commit some kind of a moral transgression? No, you didn't. It was an act of honesty. You were acknowledging all of the available and relevant facts. The robber is acknowledging none of them, including especially the one that what's in your safe doesn't belong to him. So if you have a proper conception of honesty, if you have a proper conception of morality more generally, then you don't wind up in some weird bind like this. It's like, of course I would lie to the Nazis about whether I had Jews in the attic, and I would stand morally erect doing it. That's exactly what I should do. But Peterson can't think this way. And if you are religious, you can't think this way generally because you're not getting your moral principles from observations, integrations, and logic. You're getting them from 10 Commandments or the hundreds of commandments in the Bible.
Did you eat
Don't
today?
play games.
I'm not playing a game. I'm just
Yes,
asking if
you
you ate
are.
it today.
If you present me with an intractable moral choice that's stripped of context and you back me into a corner, you're playing game. I just told you
Hypothetical.
I would do everything that I could to make sure that I'm never in that situation. By the time you've got there, you've made so many mistakes that there's nothing you can do that isn't a sin.
It's absurd for Peterson to say that. There were people in Nazi Germany who were born into that situation, or I didn't mean to have that. There were people in Nazi Germany who were born into that situation and had no say in it. Certainly children and even young adults up to a certain point didn't know fully what was going on. Many of them did, which is why they were able to support a leader like Hitler. But the fact is that, again, we don't have to be in Nazi Germany to discuss this. If a robber knocks on your door, you're in one of those situations and you didn't choose it. So it's just irresponsible and and immoral of Peterson to be taking these positions and doing it in a way where he's trying to make an ass of these perfectly legitimate questions that these young people are asking.